Israel's interests must come first, even above the advice of our oldest ally. We must stand firm in our decisions, unwavering in our resolve.
The phone crackled with tension, a palpable sense of urgency filling the air. Benjamin Netanyahu, Prime Minister of Israel, squared his shoulders, ready to face the challenge head-on. On the other end of the line, former U.S. President Donald Trump's voice boomed, echoing through the room.
And that's a good thing. It shows strength and determination.
It was a conversation about loyalty, about defiance, about standing one's ground, about putting Israel's interests first, no matter the cost. The world held its breath, watching closely, waiting for the next move.
Netanyahu wasn't listening to President Biden. He had his own agenda.
The message was clear: strength over diplomacy, aggression over compromise. Netanyahu was resolute. The call came after a drone attack, attributed to Hezbollah, targeted Netanyahu's private residence. The attack was a stark reminder. It was a stark reminder of the ever-present threat Israel faces, a threat that looms large every day. A threat Netanyahu seemed determined to meet head-on, consequences be damned. His resolve was unshakable, his determination clear. Netanyahu's spokesperson didn't mince words. Israel, they stated, would listen to U.S. concerns, but ultimately, Israel would act in its own interest. It was a bold declaration, a rejection of the usual diplomatic dance. The drone attack, they argued, proved their point. The world was a dangerous place, and Israel would defend itself, no matter the cost. International pressure mounted. Calls for restraint echoed from world capitals, but Netanyahu remained unmoved. Israel would chart its own course, even if it meant sailing into a hurricane. Trump, never one to shy away from a fight, threw fuel on the fire.
Biden has weakened Israel.
He praised Netanyahu's tough stance, echoing the former prime minister's own rhetoric. It was a familiar Trump performance, full of bluster and bravado, but beneath the surface lay a dangerous message. Trump's words, whether he intended them to or not, emboldened Netanyahu, making compromise even more difficult.
The partisan divide in the U.S. over Israel deepened.
Democrats, traditionally more supportive of a two-state solution, watched with growing alarm. Republicans, many echoing Trump's hawkish stance, cheered Netanyahu on. The stage was set for a dangerous escalation. The phone rang in Netanyahu's office. This time, it was President Biden. The news wasn't good. Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar was dead, killed in an Israeli airstrike. Biden offered condolences, but also a plea.
We must use this moment.
Use this moment, he urged Netanyahu, to seek a ceasefire. Bring the hostages home. Choose peace.
It was a long shot.
The Middle East was a tinderbox, and Netanyahu seemed intent on striking the match. But Biden, a seasoned diplomat, clung to the hope that even in the darkest of times, a flicker of peace might yet be found. Netanyahu's response was swift and unambiguous. He wasted no time in making his stance clear to both his allies and adversaries.
This is a war of resurrection, he declared, his voice echoing across the airwaves. His words were filled with a sense of urgency and determination, resonating deeply with his audience. He offered a single concession-safe passage for Hamas militants who laid down their arms and released the hostages. This was a strategic move, aimed at weakening the enemy's resolve. Narrator, media, ceasefire negotiations breaking down, scenes of ongoing conflict, military personnel in action, civilians in conflict zones. There would be no ceasefire, no surrender. The message was clear and unwavering.
It was a carefully crafted message, designed to appeal to Israeli voters. Netanyahu knew that his words needed to inspire confidence and unity among his people, while offering a fig leaf to the international community. The message was clear: Israel would fight on, no matter the cost. The international community watched closely, analyzing every word and action. The world watched, a mixture of horror and helplessness washing over them. The hope for peace, once a flickering candle, seemed to be extinguished. The conflict had reached a critical point, and the future remained uncertain. Section 6. Expanding the battlefield. The conflict, once confined to Gaza, began to spread like wildfire. Israeli jets roared over Lebanon, targeting Hezbollah's economic interests.
The message was clear: support Hamas and face the consequences. It was a risky gamble, one that threatened to engulf the entire region in flames. Hezbollah, with its vast arsenal of rockets, was not an enemy to be trifled with.
The world held its breath. Would Hezbollah retaliate? setting off a chain reaction that could spiral out of control? Or could cooler heads somehow prevail, pulling the region back from the brink? Section 7. A Grim Outlook. The future looked bleak. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict, a festering wound for decades, had entered a terrifying new phase. The hope for a two-state solution, once a distant dream, now seemed like a cruel joke. The international community, divided and seemingly powerless, struggled to find a way forward. Sanctions, diplomacy, pleas for restraint, nothing seemed to work. The human cost of the conflict continued to mount. Civilians, as always, bore the brunt of the violence. Hospitals overflowed, schools lay in ruins, and the streets ran red with blood. The world watched, appalled, but seemingly unable to stop the carnage. Section 8. The World Watches. From the halls of the United Nations to the streets of world capitals, a sense of helplessness prevailed. Condemnations rang hollow, overshadowed by the deafening roar of bombs and the heart-wrenching cries of the innocent.
The world was united in its horror, yet paralyzed by its inability to act. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict, once a regional issue, had become a global crisis, a stark reminder of humanity's capacity for both cruelty and impotence.
The images, beamed across the globe, told a story of suffering and despair, a story that seemed to have no end, a tragedy that played out on repeat, year after year, decade after decade. Section 9. A Call to Action. In a world torn apart by conflict and strife, the need for a unified response has never been more urgent. The cries for help echo across continents, resonating in the hearts of those who yearn for peace. But amidst the despair, a flicker of hope. In the darkest corners where the shadows of war loom large, there are glimmers of resilience and courage. Communities are coming together, driven by an unyielding spirit to rebuild and heal. Across the globe, people were rising up, demanding an end to the bloodshed. From bustling cities to remote villages, the call for peace is growing louder, uniting diverse voices in a common cause.
From university campuses to the halls of government, a new generation was finding its voice, demanding justice, demanding peace. Young activists are leading the charge, their passion and determination igniting a global movement. The time for empty words was over. The world could no longer afford to stand by and watch as innocent lives were lost. Action was imperative, and the message was clear. Enough talk. Act now. The international community had a moral obligation to act, to pressure both sides to lay down their arms and return to the negotiating table. Diplomatic efforts must be intensified, and every avenue for peace explored.
The path to peace would be long and arduous. It would require patience, perseverance, and unwavering commitment from all parties involved. But the rewards of peace far outweigh the costs of continued conflict. But the alternative, a future consumed by violence and hatred, was unthinkable. The scars of war run deep, and the cycle of violence must be broken to prevent further suffering. The world was watching, waiting to see if humanity could finally summon the will to break the cycle of violence and forge a more just and peaceful future. The responsibility lies with each of us to stand up, speak out, and take action for a better tomorrow. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more trending news.